When the hospital called to say her 8-year-old son was dying, Elena Varelli faced an impossible choice: let Matteo die, or call the one man she'd spent 5 years hiding from, the father who didn't know his son existed. Adrian Moretti, feared crime strategist, untouchable empire builder, the man she'd loved and abandoned while pregnant. One phone call would save her child's life. It would also shatter the carefully constructed walls she'd built around their quiet existence. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, but when your child's blood won't clot and only one person on earth can save him, silence becomes murder. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. What? The fluorescent lights in St. Catherine's Elementary School hummed with the kind of monotony that made Elena Varelli believe in ordinary days. She was folding laundry in the cramped apartment she shared with Matteo when her phone rang, the school's number flashing across the screen like a warning she didn't yet understand. Ms. Varelli? The school nurse's voice carried a tremor that made Elena's hand still over her son's favorite blue shirt. You need to come to the school immediately. It's Matteo. Elena's world narrowed to a pinpoint. What happened? He had a small accident during recess, a minor cut on his hand from the playground equipment, but the nurse paused, and in that silence, Elena heard the shape of something wrong. Ms. Varelli, the bleeding won't stop. We've applied pressure for 20 minutes. I've called an ambulance. The blue shirt slipped from Elena's fingers. She ran. The emergency room at Mercy General smelled like antiseptic and fear. Elena burst through the automatic doors still wearing her house slippers, her dark hair escaping the hasty ponytail she'd twisted it into during the frantic drive. A nurse intercepted her before she could storm the intake desk. Matteo Varelli's mother? Where is he? Elena's voice cracked. Where's my son? He's stable for now, room 3, but the doctor needs to speak with you. Room 3 was too small for the terror filling it. Matteo lay on the examination table, his brown eyes, those eyes that had always reminded Elena of someone she'd spent 5 years trying to forget, wide and frightened. His left hand was wrapped in gauze already blooming red. Mama? His voice was so small. Elena was at his side in 3 steps, her hand finding his uninjured one. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Dr. Sarah Chen entered behind her, a young trauma specialist with intelligent eyes that had seen too much. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Ms. Varelli, I need you to understand the situation. The cut on Matteo's hand is superficial, barely a centimeter deep. Under normal circumstances, it would have stopped bleeding within minutes. It's been almost an hour, and we're struggling to achieve hemostasis even with direct pressure and clotting agents. Elena's medical vocabulary was limited, gleaned from years of watching her son grow up healthy and vibrant. I don't understand. What does that mean? It means his blood isn't clotting the way it should. Dr. Chen pulled up a stool, her expression careful. I've ordered a complete coagulation panel. We're testing for several bleeding disorders: hemophilia, von Willebrand disease, platelet function disorders. Until we know what we're dealing with, we need to keep him here and monitor him closely. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Bleeding disorder, hemophilia, her son, her perfect, healthy boy who ran and played and laughed without shadows. But he's never had problems before, Elena said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. He's gotten cuts, scrapes, normal kid stuff, nothing like this. Sometimes these conditions don't manifest until a certain severity of injury occurs, or they can worsen over time. Dr. Chen's pager buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. I need to check on something. We're running the labs now. Try to keep him calm. Calm. Elena looked at her 8-year-old son, pale against white sheets, and wondered how she was supposed to manufacture calm when her own heart was shattering. Am I going to be okay, Mama? Matteo whispered. Elena forced her face into something resembling confidence. Of course you are, mi amor. The doctors are very smart. They're going to figure this out. But behind her smile, terror coiled like a living thing. The test results came back 6 hours later. Elena had spent those hours in a plastic chair beside Matteo's hospital bed, watching nurses change his bandages every 30 minutes, seeing the fear in their eyes when the bleeding continued despite everything they tried. Dr. Chen returned with a hematologist, Dr. Marcus Webb, a distinguished man in his 60s whose reputation preceded him. His presence meant this was serious. Ms. Varelli, can we speak privately? Dr. Webb asked. Elena looked at Matteo, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. She followed the doctors into the hallway, her legs unsteady. Dr. Webb didn't believe in sugarcoating. Your son has a rare genetic bleeding disorder called factor XI deficiency, complicated by an acquired platelet dysfunction. It's a dangerous combination. His blood essentially can't form stable clots. The hallway tilted. Elena grabbed the wall for support. What does that mean? Can you treat it? We can manage it, but there's a complication. Dr. Webb glanced at Dr. Chen, who nodded for him to continue. The mutation your son carries is extremely rare. Standard factor replacement isn't working as well as we'd hoped. His bleeding has slowed but hasn't stopped completely. And there's evidence of internal bleeding starting microscopic right now, but it could cascade. What do you need? Elena's voice came out stronger than she felt. Blood transfusion? I'll give him mine right now. We've tested your blood, Ms. Varelli. You're not a match for directed donation. Your factor levels are normal, but your blood type creates antibody complications. Dr. Webb's expression softened slightly. In cases like this, the best chance often comes from a close genetic relative, a parent, sibling, or I'm his only parent. The lie came automatically, 5 years of practice making it smooth. There's no one else. Doctor. Chen stepped forward. Ms. Varelli, I need to be direct. Matteo's condition is critical. Without a compatible donor, someone whose genetic markers align closely enough to provide the specific factors his body needs, we're looking at a very narrow window, maybe 48 hours before the internal bleeding becomes life-threatening. 48 hours. 2 days. Elena felt the floor drop away beneath her. What about a registry? She asked desperately. Bone marrow donors, blood banks? We're searching, Dr. Webb said, but his markers are uncommon. The likelihood of finding an unrelated match in time is less than 3%. Less than 3%. Elena looked through the window into Matteo's room at her son's small form under hospital blankets. His chest rose and fell steadily, unaware that his own blood was slowly betraying him. You said a close genetic relative, she heard herself say. The father. If we could find him. Doctor. Webb's expression shifted to something like hope. A biological father would have approximately a 50% chance of being a suitable donor. If his factor levels and genetic markers align, we could use his blood plasma to create a targeted treatment. It's Matteo's best chance. The words hung in the sterile air between them. Matteo's best chance. His only chance. Elena closed her eyes and saw a different hospital, 5 years ago. She'd been newly pregnant, glowing with terrified joy, when the first threat arrived. A photograph of her sleeping, taken through her bedroom window. No words, just the image and a single red X marked over her stomach. She'd run that night, disappeared into a new city, a new name, a new life built on silence, because loving Adrian Moretti came with a price she wasn't willing to pay. But now, I know where he is, Elena whispered. The decision took her 3 hours. 3 hours of sitting beside Matteo's bed, watching his small chest rise and fall, seeing the fresh blood seep through new bandages every 30 minutes. 3 hours of weighing her son's life against the dangers she'd spent 5 years running from. There was no contest. At midnight, Elena stepped into the hospital's family consultation room and pulled out the phone she'd kept hidden for 5 years, a burner cell with exactly one contact saved. She'd never deleted the number, though she'd never planned to use it again. Her finger hovered over the call button. 5 years of silence, 5 years of protection, all about to shatter. She pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice, deep, controlled, unmistakable, even through digital compression. This number doesn't exist. Adrian Moretti's tone carried the weight of someone who didn't expect ghosts to call him past midnight. It's me, Elena said. Silence. Not empty silence, but the kind loaded with recognition and shock and something sharper. Elena. Her name in his mouth after 5 years felt like touching a live wire. Where are you? Mercy General Hospital, Chicago. Her voice steadied, found its purpose. I need you. Are you hurt? The question came fast, edged with something that might have been concern if Adrian Moretti was capable of such civilian emotions. Not me. Elena looked through the consultation room window at Matteo's door down the hall. Adrian, I need you to listen carefully. I need you to come to this hospital. I need you to bring your medical records, blood work, genetic screening, anything you have. And I need you to not ask questions until you get here. Elena, what? Please. The word broke. Please, just trust me, like I trusted you once. Another silence, this one calculating, then, I'll be there in 40 minutes. The line went dead. Elena sat in the darkened consultation room and wondered what kind of explosion she'd just triggered. Adrian Moretti didn't do anything by halves. He would arrive with questions, demands, and quite possibly armed security despite being in a hospital. But he would arrive. And that was all that mattered. She returned to Matteo's room and took her son's small hand in hers, careful to avoid the IV lines and sensors. Mama? He stirred, not quite awake. Are you still here? Always, baby, always. I had a dream, Matteo mumbled, eyes still closed. About a man with eyes like mine. He said I was going to be okay. Elena's breath caught. Matteo had never asked about his father. She'd cultivated a quiet family story of just the two of them, enough truth mixed with omission to satisfy a child's curiosity. But sometimes, in moments like this, she wondered what lived in the spaces between genetics and knowing. You're going to be okay, Elena whispered. I promise. It was a promise she had no right to make, but it was the only one that mattered. But Adrian Moretti arrived in 33 minutes. Elena was standing in the hallway outside Matteo's room when the elevator doors opened and he stepped out. 6 feet of controlled power in a tailored black suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. His dark hair was immaculate despite the midnight hour, his jaw carved from the same stone as his reputation. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. The same warm brown as Matteo's, the exact same shade. Adrian's security team, 2 men who moved like weapons disguised as businessmen, flanked him. He gestured them back with a slight movement of his hand. They retreated to positions by the elevator, watching everything, missing nothing. Then Adrian's gaze found Elena. She watched the impact hit him. 5 years hadn't dimmed the connection, that electric recognition that had drawn them together before everything fell apart. He crossed the distance between them in measured steps, each one controlled. You look, he started. Adrian, I need to tell you something. And I need you to not interrupt until I'm finished. Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together. 8 years ago, we were together. You know that. What you don't know is that when I left, when I disappeared, I was pregnant. She watched his face, watched the calculation in his eyes shift to something sharper. I had a son. Our son. His name is Matteo. He's 8 years old, and he's in that room behind me dying from a blood disorder. The doctors say he needs a genetic match for donor blood. I'm not compatible. You're the only other option. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes, a seismic shift happening in controlled silence. Show me, he said. Elena's throat closed. She turned and led him to Matteo's room. The boy was sleeping, his face peaceful despite the monitors and IV lines. His dark hair fell across his forehead in waves Elena had learned to trim herself. His small hands, one bandaged, one free, lay still on the blanket. Adrian stood in the doorway and stared. Elena watched him see it. The shape of Matteo's face, still soft with childhood, but carrying the bones of Adrian's own features. The curve of his mouth, the strong line of his nose, still young, but showing promise of the man he'd become. And those eyes, when Matteo's fluttered open for a moment, disturbed by some dream, exactly the shade of his father's. He's 8, Adrian said quietly. Yes. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. And you never... His jaw tightened. You never told me. I couldn't. Elena's voice was steady now, past fear into simple truth. Adrian, someone sent me a threat. A photograph of me sleeping with a target marked on my stomach. I was 3 months pregnant. The message was clear. Leave or we both die. So I left. Adrian's hands flexed at his sides. The only outward sign of the rage she knew was building inside him. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. Who sent it? I don't know. I didn't stay to find out. I just ran. And you thought I couldn't protect you? The question wasn't accusatory. It was genuine, and that somehow made it worse. I thought... Elena stopped, started again. I thought loving you came with a price I couldn't pay. Not for me. For him. So I chose to pay a different price instead. Adrian looked at Matteo again. His son. The child he hadn't known existed until 3 minutes ago. What do the doctors need? He asked. Blood work, genetic screening. They need to see if you're a match for directed donation. If your factors align with his, they can use your blood plasma to treat him. When? Now. Tonight. He has less than 2 days before... Elena's voice broke. She forced it steady. Before the internal bleeding becomes irreversible. Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, I'm at Mercy General. I need my complete medical file sent here immediately. Everything. Blood work, genetic screening, surgical history, every test I've ever had. A pause. I don't care what time it is. 20 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Elena. What else? They'll need to draw blood, run compatibility tests. Where's the doctor? Elena pressed the call button. Dr. Webb arrived within minutes, alerted by the nursing staff that Matteo's room had a visitor who radiated the kind of authority that made people move fast. Dr. Webb, this is... Elena hesitated. Adrian Moretti. Adrian finished. I'm the father. You need my blood. Take it. Dr. Webb's eyes widened slightly. He clearly recognized the name, but his professionalism held. We'll need to run several tests first. If you're compatible, we can begin plasma collection immediately. Follow me. Adrian looked at Elena once more. His expression was unreadable, locked down behind the control he wielded like armor. We're not finished, he said quietly. I know. Then he followed Dr. Webb out, leaving Elena alone with their son, and the weight of 5 years of silence finally broken. The hospital fell into the strange quiet of deep night. Elena sat beside Matteo's bed, listening to monitors beep and watching nurses make their rounds. Down the hall, Adrian was giving blood, submitting to genetic tests, probably interrogating Dr. Webb about every detail of Matteo's condition with the same focused intensity he applied to hostile business negotiations. She'd prepared for this moment 1,000 times in her mind. Imagined the confrontation, the anger, the accusations. But sitting here in the fluorescent-lit reality of it, Elena realized she'd prepared for the wrong thing. She hadn't prepared for the immediate, unquestioning action, the way Adrian had looked at Matteo and simply moved forward. No demands for proof, no theatrical denials, just, where's the doctor? Just, take it. The door opened quietly. Elena expected a nurse, but found Adrian instead. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled his sleeves to reveal the cotton ball taped inside his elbow, evidence of blood draw. His tie was loosened, the first time she'd seen him anything less than perfectly composed. They're running the tests now, he said. Results in 90 minutes. Elena nodded. Words felt inadequate. Adrian moved to the opposite side of Matteo's bed. He stood there for a long moment, looking down at the sleeping child. His child. He has your hands, Adrian said quietly. Elena blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, his fingers, the way they curve, that's you. She looked at Matteo's small hand, the one not bandaged. She'd never noticed. When's his birthday? Adrian asked. November 7th. His favorite color? Blue. Like the ocean, he says, though he's never seen it. Never. Adrian's jaw tightened. You've been hiding in Chicago for 5 years? Hiding is a strong word. Living quietly. What do you do? For work? Elena hesitated, suddenly aware of the vast gulf between their realities. I work at a bookstore. Morrison's, on 5th Street, part-time. It's enough for what we need. A bookstore, Adrian repeated. He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You walked away from everything. Built a whole life I knew nothing about. To keep him safe? I know. The interruption was gentle. I understand why you ran, Elena. I spent the last 5 years building an empire secure enough that threats like that don't exist anymore. I eliminated the families who played those games. I restructured everything so that the people I care about... He stopped. So that wouldn't be a vulnerability. But it was. Back then. Yes. Back then, loving me was dangerous. Adrian's hand rested on the bed rail, inches from Matteo's shoulder. Now it's just expensive. The attempt at levity fell flat. I should have trusted you, Elena said. I should have told you. You did what you thought was right. You protected him. Adrian's eyes met hers across their son's sleeping form. You gave him 8 years of safety. That matters. He's going to have questions when this is over. When? Adrian echoed. Not if. When? Elena agreed firmly. They stood in silence, two people who'd once known each other's rhythms, now strangers navigating the minefield of shared parenthood and lost time. Tell me about him, Adrian said finally. Everything. I've missed 8 years. I want to know. So Elena told him. She told him about the pregnancy, spent alone in a studio apartment in South Chicago, working 2 jobs until her 8th month. About Matteo's birth, 23 hours of labor, no family, no friends, just Elena and a sympathetic nurse who held her hand through the worst of it. She told him about Matteo's first word, book, his first steps toward a library shelf, the way he learned to read at 4 and devoured stories like other children devoured candy. He's brilliant, Elena said softly. Scary smart. His teachers say he's reading at a 6th grade level. He asks questions about everything, science, history, how things work. Last week he wanted to know why the sky is blue. And when I gave him the simple answer, he asked about Rayleigh scattering and atmospheric composition. He's 8, Adrian said, but there was wonder in his voice. He's 8 going on 40. Elena smiled despite everything. He takes care of me, reminds me to eat when I work double shifts, leaves me notes with terrible jokes to make me laugh. Her voice cracked. He's the best thing I've ever done. Adrian's hand moved almost unconsciously to touch Matteo's hair. The gesture was tentative, as if he feared the boy might dissolve at contact. He has nightmares sometimes, Elena continued, about being alone. I think he picks up on my fear that something will happen to me and he'll have no one. I've tried to hide it, but children know. He won't be alone. Adrian's voice carried absolute certainty. Whatever happens, he'll never be alone again. The door opened. Doctor. Webb entered, holding the tablet and wearing an expression Elena couldn't quite read. The results are back, he said. Elena's world contracted to those 4 words. Dr. Webb looked between them, then focused on Adrian. Mr. Moretti, you're not just compatible. You're a near-perfect match. Your factor levels, genetic markers, blood type. It's like looking at Matteo's results in adult form. I've never seen a parent-child match this precise. The breath Elena had been holding released in a rush. What does that mean? Adrian asked. For treatment? It means we can proceed immediately. We'll collect blood plasma through apheresis, a process that separates plasma from whole blood and returns the red cells to you. Takes about 90 minutes. Then we'll prepare a concentrated factor infusion tailored specifically to Matteo's deficiency. If it works the way I expect, we should see results within hours. And if it doesn't work? Elena forced herself to ask. Doctor, Webb's expression softened. Then we'll have bought time to explore other options. But Ms. Varelli, I'm optimistic. This is the best-case scenario we could have hoped for. Adrian was already moving toward the door. Let's start now. Adrian, Elena caught his arm. You should rest. You've been awake. I'm fine. He looked at her, and for the first time since arriving, she saw past the control to the fear beneath. Elena, that's my son. I'm not resting until he's out of danger. Doctor. Webb nodded. Follow me, Mr. Moretti. We'll get started immediately. As Adrian left, he paused at the door, looking back at Matteo one more time. I missed 8 years, he said quietly. I'm not missing another minute. Then he was gone. Elena sank into the chair beside Matteo's bed and finally let herself cry. Silent tears of relief and terror and something more complicated, the unraveling of 5 years of careful isolation, the reweaving of lives that were never supposed to intersect again. On the bed, Matteo stirred. "Mama?" His voice was sleepy, confused. "Why are you crying?" Elena wiped her eyes quickly. "Happy tears, baby. Very happy tears." "Is someone helping me?" The question was so innocent, so trusting. "Yes, mi amor. Someone very special is helping you." "Who?" Elena took a breath. The truth had to start somewhere. "Your father," she said softly. "Your papa is here." Matteo's eyes widened. "I have a papa?" "You always did, sweetheart. He just didn't know about you. But he knows now, and he's helping make you better." "Does he have eyes like mine?" Matteo asked. Elena's breath caught. "How did you—" "I dreamed about him, the man with eyes like mine." Matteo yawned, fighting sleep. "He seemed nice." "He is," Elena said, surprised to find she meant it. "He's very nice and very strong, and he's going to help you get better." "Good." Matteo's eyes drifted closed again. "I want to meet him." "You will, baby. Soon. I promise." As Matteo slipped back into sleep, Elena sat in the dim room and contemplated the future rushing toward them. A future where secrets were no longer shields, where the man she'd loved and lost knew about the son they'd created, where three separate lives were about to collide and reshape into something entirely new. The monitors beeped steadily. Down the hall, Adrian gave his blood for a child he'd just learned existed. And Elena, caught between past and present, could only hope she'd made the right choice. Because there was no going back now. The silence was broken, and everything was about to change. The apheresis machine hummed in the private collection room like a mechanical heartbeat. Adrian sat perfectly still in the medical recliner, watching his blood flow through clear tubes, drawn out, separated, returned. The process was hypnotic if you didn't think too hard about why it was necessary. Dr. Webb monitored the equipment with practiced efficiency, occasionally adjusting flow rates and checking Adrian's vitals. Behind him, two lab techs prepared the plasma for processing, their movements quick and precise. "Your blood pressure is remarkable," Dr. Webb commented. "Most people get anxious during apheresis. You're steady as a rock." "I've had practice controlling my reactions," Adrian said. He didn't elaborate. The doctor didn't need to know about the business negotiations conducted under threat. The hostile takeovers managed without flinching. The countless situations where showing fear meant losing everything. "How long have you known about Matteo?" Dr. Webb asked, then immediately added, "You don't have to answer that. Not my business." 3 hours. Adrian watched the plasma bag fill with the pale yellow fluid that might save his son's life. "I found out my son existed approximately 3 hours ago." Dr. Webb's hand stilled on the equipment. "I'm sorry, that must be complicated," Adrian finished. "The word you're looking for is complicated." They fell into silence. Adrian used the time to think, to plan, to strategize the way he approached every problem. Except this wasn't a business problem. This was his child fighting for life, while Adrian had spent 8 years building an empire instead of knowing that child existed. The anger would come later. Right now, there was only the immediate necessity: save Matteo. Everything else could wait. His phone buzzed. Marcus, his head of security, with updates on the hospital's security protocols. Adrian had already ordered a complete assessment: exits, camera coverage, potential vulnerabilities, old habits from dangerous times, habits he'd thought were no longer necessary. But Elena had been threatened. Someone had sent her running with a target marked on their unborn child. That someone was still out there. Adrian made a mental note to have Marcus pull every piece of intelligence from 8 years ago, find out who'd been bold enough or stupid enough to threaten someone Adrian cared about, because that person's time was running out, whether they knew it yet or not. "All finished," Dr. Webb announced, disconnecting the tubes with practiced efficiency. "We collected more than enough. I'll have this processed and ready for infusion within the hour." Adrian stood, rolling down his sleeve. "What are his chances?" "Real numbers, not optimistic medical speak." Dr. Webb respected the directness. "With this plasma match, 70% chance of complete stabilization within 12 hours, 20% chance of significant improvement requiring additional treatment, 10% chance it doesn't work at all. And if it doesn't work, then we explore synthetic factor replacements, experimental treatments. But Mr. Moretti, I've been doing this for 30 years. That match you have with your son is extraordinary. I'm betting on the 70%. Adrian nodded. How soon until you can start? As soon as the plasma is processed. 45 minutes, maybe less. I want to be there when you do. Of course. Dr. Webb gathered his equipment. You can wait in Matteo's room if you'd like. Mrs. Varelli is... I know where she is. Adrian headed for the door, then paused. Doctor, I need complete discretion about my presence here. No media, no records beyond what's medically necessary. Dr. Webb's expression showed he understood the request came with weight behind it. Patient confidentiality covers everyone involved, Mr. Moretti. Your name won't appear anywhere it doesn't need to. Good. Adrian left the collection room and walked the corridor back to Matteo's room. The hospital's overnight skeleton crew barely noticed him. Another expensive suit in a place where expensive suits came to pay for miracles. His security team maintained their distance, watchful but unobtrusive. At Matteo's door, Adrian stopped. Through the window, he could see Elena sitting beside the bed, her hand resting near their son's. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her clothes rumpled from hours of fear. But she was beautiful in the way that mattered, the kind of beauty that came from fierce love and fiercer protection. She'd run from him to save their child, and he'd spent 5 years not knowing what he'd lost. Adrian pushed open the door quietly. Elena looked up, relief flooding her features when she saw him. How did it go? She asked softly, mindful of Matteo sleeping. Fine. They collected what they need. Dr. Webb says 45 minutes until they can start the infusion. Adrian moved to the other side of the bed, maintaining the careful distance they'd established. He's still sleeping? On and off. They gave him something for the pain earlier. Elena studied his face. You should rest. There's a waiting room. I'm not leaving. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Elena nodded, accepting it. They sat in silence, two parents watching their child breathe, until Elena spoke again. I need to tell you something else, she said, about that night, when I left. Adrian's attention sharpened. You don't have to... Yes, I do. Elena's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. You deserve to know why I ran instead of coming to you. Why I chose to disappear. She took a breath, gathering the memory like broken glass, sharp and dangerous to touch. It was a Thursday. I'd found out I was pregnant on Monday. I was terrified but happy. I was going to tell you that weekend. Elena's eyes were distant, seeing the past. Thursday night, I came home from work and found the photograph on my kitchen table. Someone had been inside my apartment. Inside Adrian. While I was at work, they broke in, went through my things, and left that picture on the table where I'd see it first thing. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The photo was me sleeping in my own bed from the night before, and there was a red X marked over my stomach, right where the baby was. No note, no explanation, just that. Elena's voice dropped. I called you immediately, but you were in Singapore for that merger, remember? 3 weeks of back-to-back negotiations? I remember, Adrian said quietly. The Tanaka deal. Your assistant said you were in meetings around the clock, that you'd call when you had time, but time was something I didn't have. Elena looked at her hands. I sat in that apartment for 6 hours trying to convince myself it was a prank, a mistake. Then my neighbor knocked on my door. She said she'd seen 2 men watching my building earlier. Professional types, she said, the kind who noticed things. You should have kept calling, Adrian said, but there was no accusation in it, just regret. I tried. I called 17 times that night, left messages, sent texts, but you were in negotiations and I was 7,000 miles away with a target on my unborn child. Elena met his eyes. By morning, I'd made the decision. I packed 1 bag, withdrew cash from 3 different ATMs, bought a bus ticket, and left. I didn't use credit cards, didn't contact anyone, just vanished. And came to Chicago. Eventually. First I went to St. Louis, stayed in a motel for 2 months, working under the table at a diner. Then I heard about a bookstore here that needed help and didn't ask too many questions. The owner, Mrs. Morrison, she was kind, asked if I was running from someone. When I didn't answer, she just nodded and said the apartment above the store was mine if I wanted it. Adrian processed this. adding details to the picture forming in his mind. You've been living above a bookstore for 5 years. It's safe, quiet, good schools nearby. Mrs. Morrison looks after Matteo when I work. She's basically the grandmother he never had. Elena's voice softened. It's not what I had with you, but it's been enough. Until now. Until now, Elena agreed. She looked at Matteo, then back at Adrian. I need you to understand something. I didn't keep him from you out of spite or revenge. I kept him from you because I thought it was the only way to keep him breathing. Right or wrong, I made that choice believing it was his only chance. I know, Adrian said. And he did. He'd built his reputation on reading people, on understanding motivations beneath actions. Elena's fear was written in every careful choice she'd made. The quiet life, the anonymous job, the deliberate invisibility. But Elena, I need you to understand something too. I'm not the same man I was 8 years ago. The business I ran then, the risks I took, the enemies I accumulated, I restructured everything, made it clean, legal. The people who played games like threatening pregnant women, they're gone. I made sure of it. All of them? The ones that mattered. Adrian's tone carried the weight of actions Elena could probably imagine, but didn't need confirmed. I built something different. Something that doesn't make targets out of the people I... He stopped, recalibrated. Out of the people in my life. Elena was quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I just stayed hidden, stopped following news about you, stopped looking. I know. I looked for you, though. For the first year, I had investigators searching. Then I assumed you'd left because you wanted to, that whatever we had wasn't enough to make you stay. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. It was everything, Elena said softly. That was the problem. You were everything, and I couldn't risk everything when everything included someone else's life. Do you understand? I do now. Adrian looked at Matteo. I see him, and I understand exactly what you'd sacrifice to keep him safe. The door opened, interrupting the moment. A nurse entered to check Matteo's vitals and change his bandages. Both Elena and Adrian watched in tense silence as she carefully unwrapped the gauze on his hand. The cut was still seeping, but slower than before. A small improvement. A reason for hope. Doctor will be in soon with the treatment, the nurse said gently. Try to get some rest if you can. Both of you look exhausted. After she left, Elena stood and stretched, her back protesting hours in an uncomfortable chair. I should call the bookstore. Let Mrs. Morrison know what's happening. She'll want to visit when Matteo's feeling better. Does she know about me? Adrian asked. Elena shook her head. No one does. I told Matteo his father wasn't in the picture, not dead, not absent by choice, just not there. I thought it was kinder than explaining the truth. And what is the truth? That I loved you enough to leave you. Elena's eyes met his. That staying would have meant choosing between you and our baby, and I couldn't make that choice. So I made a different one. Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. What is it? Elena asked, catching the change. Security footage from 8 years ago. Marcus is pulling archives from my old office building. Adrian showed her the screen, a photo of a man in a dark coat entering an elevator. He thinks this might be related to the threat you received. Someone who had access to my schedule, knew about you, knew I'd be out of the country. Elena stared at the grainy image. Do you recognize him? Not clearly, but Marcus will. He keeps records. Adrian pocketed the phone. Elena, I need to ask you something. When Matteo gets better, and he will get better, what happens next? The question was direct, unavoidable. Elena had thought about this during the long night. Thought about the impossibility of returning to their quiet life above the bookstore when that life was built on a secret that no longer existed. Thought about what Matteo would ask, what he deserved to know, what kind of future they were walking into. I don't know, she admitted. I haven't thought past getting him through this. Then let me think for both of us. Adrian's voice was calm, measured, the tone of someone proposing a business arrangement, except this was anything but. When Matteo recovers, you don't go back to hiding. You don't go back to that apartment above a bookstore, working part-time and hoping no one notices you exist. Adrian, let me finish. He held up a hand. I'm not saying this to control you or because I think I have some claim on you after 8 years. I'm saying this because that boy in that bed is my son, and I've missed 8 years of his life. I won't miss any more." Elena's throat tightened. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you let me be his father, not as some weekend visitation arrangement, not as a check I write once a month. I want to know him. I want him to know me, and I want to make sure that whatever threat sent you running 8 years ago never comes near either of you again." "He's not a business deal, Adrian. I know that." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Hurt, maybe, or frustration. "Elena, I'm not trying to buy my way into his life. I'm asking you to let me in. However that works. Whatever that looks like." Before Elena could answer, Dr. Webb entered carrying a specialized IV bag filled with amber-colored plasma. "We're ready," he announced. "The concentrated factor infusion is prepared. We'll start with a slow drip, monitor for reactions, then increase if he tolerates it well. With luck, we'll see improvement within 4 to 6 hours." Elena moved to Matteo's side instantly. "Will it hurt?" "He shouldn't feel anything beyond the IV insertion, which is already in place." Dr. Webb began hanging the bag and connecting tubing. "His vitals are stable. This is the best possible scenario for attempting treatment." Adrian stood on the opposite side of the bed, watching as his blood, processed, concentrated, transformed into medicine, began flowing into their son's veins. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. 8 years too late, but he was finally able to protect this child. Matteo stirred as the infusion started, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at the IV, then at Elena, then across the bed to Adrian. His gaze settled there, confused but curious. "Mama?" His voice was small, uncertain. "Is this the man from my dream?" Elena's breath caught. She looked at Adrian, then back at Matteo. "Baby, this is your papa, the one I told you about earlier. He's here to help make you better." Matteo studied Adrian with the serious intensity only children could manage. "You have my eyes," he observed. "I think you have mine," Adrian replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Since I had them first." "That's fair." Matteo considered this logic. "Are you really my papa?" "Yes." "Where have you been?" The question was innocent, without accusation, but it hit harder than any hostile business negotiation Adrian had ever faced. "I didn't know about you," Adrian said honestly. "Your mama had good reasons for not telling me, but I know now, and I'm here." "Are you staying?" Matteo asked. "Or are you leaving like people do in stories?" Elena started to intervene, but Adrian spoke first. "I'm staying," he said. "I don't know what that looks like yet, and I don't know all the details. But I'm not leaving you, Matteo. That's a promise." Matteo seemed to weigh this. Then he yawned, the medication and exhaustion pulling him back towards sleep. "Okay, that's good. Mama gets sad sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking. Maybe you can make her less sad." He drifted off before either adult could respond. Elena turned away, blinking back tears. Adrian watched her shoulders shake with silent emotion. Relief, fear, gratitude, grief all tangled together. Dr. Webb finished setting the infusion rate and made notes on his tablet. "I'll check back in an hour. Call if anything changes before then." He left quietly, giving them privacy. Adrian moved around the bed slowly, approaching Elena like she might bolt. "Hey," he said softly. She wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine, just tired." "You're allowed to not be fine." Elena laughed, but it came out broken. "I've spent 5 years being fine, being strong, being enough for both of us. I can't just—" She gestured helplessly. "I can't just fall apart because you showed up and suddenly I don't have to do this alone anymore." "Why not?" The question was so simple it derailed her completely. "Because Elena stopped. "Because I can't afford to. Because if I stop being strong, everything falls apart. Or maybe if you stop being strong for 5 minutes, you realize you don't have to hold everything together by yourself." Adrian's hand hovered near her shoulder, not quite touching. "I'm here, Elena. Let me help carry this." She turned to face him fully. They stood close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, too, the careful control barely masking deeper emotion. This was costing him, too, the shock, the lost years, the sudden weight of fatherhood thrust upon him in a hospital room at 3 in the morning. I'm scared, Elena whispered. I'm terrified this won't work. That I made him hide for nothing. That bringing you here put him in more danger instead of saving him. Well, the infusion will work, Adrian said with absolute certainty. And you didn't bring me here for nothing. You brought me here because you're his mother and you'd do anything to save him. That's not weakness, Elena. That's the strongest thing you could possibly do. Even if it means facing what I ran from? Especially then. They stood in the quiet of the hospital room. Two people who'd loved each other once and created something extraordinary in the process. The years between them felt both vast and irrelevant, vast in the experiences they'd had separately, irrelevant in the face of their shared purpose now. I should sleep, Elena said finally. You're right. I'm exhausted. There's a couch over there. I'll wake you if anything changes. Elena hesitated. What about you? I don't sleep much anymore. Habit from too many years of late negotiations and early meetings. Adrian gestured to the chair she'd vacated. I'll sit, watch, think. About what? About how I'm going to find whoever threatened you. About what happens when Matteo gets better. About whether you still take your coffee black with 2 sugars or if that's changed too. The specificity of the memory, something so small from so long ago, made Elena's chest ache. Still black, still 2 sugars. Good. Some things should stay the same. Elena moved to the small couch against the wall. It was barely long enough to lie down on, but it beat the chair. She curled up, wrapping her jacket around herself like a blanket, and closed her eyes. Sleep came faster than she expected. The crash after adrenaline, the body's demand for rest after too many hours of fear. Her last conscious thought was of Adrian sitting vigil beside their son, keeping watch over what they'd made together 8 years ago. The strong protecting the vulnerable. Exactly as it should be. Adrian sat in the chair Elena had abandoned and watched both of them sleep. Mother and son, faces relaxed in rest, similar in ways that had nothing to do with genetics, and everything to do with the life they'd built together. He pulled out his phone and composed a message to Marcus. Pull everything from 8 years ago. Every threat assessment, every security incident, every person who had access to my schedule during the Singapore trip. Someone threatened her. I want to know who. Marcus's response came within seconds. Already on it. Preliminary sweep shows 3 possibles. Compiling files now. Adrian set the phone aside and leaned back, letting his mind work through possibilities. The business landscape 8 years ago had been different. More volatile, more dangerous. He'd been younger then, more willing to take risks, less concerned with legacy, and more focused on building power. That version of himself would have handled a threat to Elena differently. Messier, maybe. Certainly more directly. But this version, the one who'd just discovered he had a son, this version wanted precision, wanted to know exactly who'd cost him 8 years with his child, who'd sent Elena running in fear, who'd dared to target someone Adrian loved. Because despite the years, despite the silence, he realized the feeling hadn't changed. He still loved her. That truth settled into his chest like coming home after a long journey. The intervening years hadn't erased it, only buried it under layers of assumption and resignation. But seeing her again, seeing what she'd sacrificed, what she'd built, what she'd protected, brought it roaring back with uncomfortable clarity. She'd left to save their child. She'd chosen Matteo over everything, including herself. And she'd done it alone. Adrian looked at his son, watching the steady rise and fall of his small chest. The infusion dripped slowly, each drop carrying the biological code they shared, the genetic bond that made them father and son regardless of time or knowledge. I'm going to fix this, Adrian whispered to the sleeping boy. I'm going to make sure you never have to hide again, that your mother never has to choose between safety and truth. Whatever it takes, Matteo. That's my promise to you. The monitors beeped softly. The hospital corridor outside was quiet. And Adrian Moretti, strategist, businessman, feared negotiator, sat watch over his family and planned how to make their world safe enough to live in openly. Because some things were worth more than empires. Some things were worth everything. Hours passed in measured quiet. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting monitors, noting improvements so subtle they meant everything. The bleeding from Matteo's hand slowed further. His color improved marginally. Small victories that added up to hope. At dawn, Dr. Webb returned to examine his patient. He studied the monitors, checked the infusion site, reviewed the overnight notes. Then he looked at Adrian with something approaching amazement. "It's working," he said simply. "His factor levels are rising. The internal bleeding has stopped. This is exactly what we hoped for." Adrian felt something in his chest loosen, tension he'd been holding since the moment Elena said their son was dying. He's going to be okay? If he continues improving at this rate, yes. He'll need ongoing monitoring, possibly periodic factor infusions for maintenance. But Mr. Moretti, your son is going to survive this. The words hung in the early morning light, solid and real and impossible to discount. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself one moment of pure relief before snapping back to control. What's next? We continue the current infusion for another 6 hours. If his levels stabilize, we can transition to oral medications and a home care plan. He'll need specialist follow-up, regular testing, activity restrictions until we're certain the treatment holds. Whatever he needs, Adrian said. Cost isn't a factor. I gathered that. Dr. Webb smiled slightly. I'll update his chart. You might want to let his mother know the good news when she wakes. As if summoned by the words, Elena stirred on the couch. She sat up slowly, disoriented, then immediately looked to Matteo's bed. Her eyes found Adrian questioning. He's better, Adrian said. The treatment worked. Elena's face crumpled with relief. She stood on shaky legs and moved to Matteo's bedside, her hand finding his forehead, checking for fever with maternal instinct more reliable than any thermometer. His color is better, she whispered. He looks better. The doctor says he's stabilizing. The bleeding stopped. Elena's shoulders shook with silent sobs, the kind of crying that came from fear finally releasing its grip. Adrian stood and moved beside her, his presence steady, if not touching. He's going to be okay, Elena. Our son is going to be okay. Because of you, she managed. Because you came, because we both love him, Adrian interrupted gently. That's all that matters right now. Matteo chose that moment to wake, his eyes opening slowly and focusing on his parents standing together beside his bed. A small smile crossed his face. You're both here, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in hours. We're both here, Elena confirmed, wiping her tears. How do you feel, baby? Tired, but better. Matteo looked at his bandaged hand. Does this mean I don't have to go to school today? The normalcy of the question, so perfectly childlike, made both adults laugh with relief. No school for a while, Elena said. Just rest and getting better. Can Papa stay? Matteo asked, testing the new word in his mouth, seeing how it felt. Adrian answered before Elena could. As long as you want me to. Good, Matteo yawned. I have lots of questions, but maybe after I sleep more. Sleep all you want, Adrian said. The questions will keep. As Matteo drifted back to sleep, Elena looked at Adrian across their son's bed. So much unspoken between them. Questions about the future, about what happened next, about how 3 separate lives became one family. But those questions could wait. For now, there was only this. A child sleeping peacefully, his blood finally clotting the way it should, his parents standing watch together. The crisis had passed, but the real work was just beginning. 3 days later, Matteo was sitting up in bed demanding chocolate pudding and complaining that hospital TV didn't have the science documentaries he liked. Elena took it as the best possible sign that her son was returning to normal. The ocean one isn't educational enough? She asked, gesturing to the screen where colorful fish darted across a coral reef. It's pretty, but it doesn't explain the ecosystem dynamics, Matteo said seriously. I want to know about the symbiotic relationships, not just look at fish. Adrian, who'd been reviewing documents on his tablet from the chair he'd claimed as his own, looked up with barely concealed amusement. He's 8 and using the term ecosystem dynamics correctly. I told you he was scary smart, Elena said. She'd watched Adrian's relationship with Matteo develop over 3 days of hospital recovery, seen the careful way he approached fatherhood like a complex negotiation, observing, learning, adapting. He brought books instead of toys, asked questions instead of making assumptions, and listened to Matteo's long explanations about everything from black holes to why certain dinosaurs had feathers with genuine interest. What if I could get you better documentaries? Adrian asked Matteo. Would that make the hospital more tolerable? Matteo's eyes lit up. Really? Like the BBC Nature series? Mama can't afford the streaming service, but I've read about them. Elena felt the familiar sting of inadequacy. All the small things she couldn't provide on a bookstore salary, all the ways her protective choices had limited her son's world. Adrian must have caught her expression because his voice was carefully neutral when he responded. I think we can manage that. What else would make this easier? Books, Matteo said immediately. The hospital library is mostly picture books for little kids. I finished the 3 chapter books they had on the first day. What kind of books do you like? Science fiction, space exploration, mysteries. Mama reads to me at night, but we're between books right now. Adrian made a note on his phone. Within 20 minutes, a hospital volunteer arrived with a stack of age-appropriate novels and a tablet loaded with documentary streaming services. Matteo's delighted expression was worth whatever Adrian had paid to make it happen that fast. How did you... Elena started. I made a call, Adrian said simply. It's not that complicated when you know who to ask. But Elena saw through the casual dismissal. He'd called in favors, probably paid premium rates, all to make their son smile. It was such a small thing in the scope of what Adrian could afford, but it meant everything to a boy who'd spent 3 days in a hospital bed being brave. That evening, after Matteo had fallen asleep clutching a new book about Mars exploration, Elena and Adrian sat in the relative quiet of the hospital room. Dr. Webb had cleared Matteo for discharge in 2 days pending final blood work, which meant conversations about the future could no longer be postponed. We need to talk about what happens next, Adrian said, echoing her thoughts. Elena had been dreading this. I know. I've been thinking about logistics, the apartment above the bookstore. How many bedrooms? 1. Matteo and I share. It's enough for us. Adrian's expression was carefully controlled. It won't be enough when he comes home from the hospital. He'll need his own space, quiet, somewhere he can recover properly. And you'll need to be close enough to monitor him but have your own room to actually rest. Adrian, I can't afford to move right now. Between the hospital bills and taking time off work. The hospital bills are handled, Adrian interrupted. I took care of that yesterday. Elena's stomach dropped. What do you mean, handled? I mean the balance is 0, paid in full, including all future treatments and specialist appointments. She stood abruptly, anger flaring hot in her chest. You had no right to do that without asking me. He's my son. I have every right to pay for his medical care. That's not the point. Elena's voice rose, then immediately dropped when she remembered Matteo sleeping nearby. She moved to the hallway, Adrian following. Once the door closed behind them, she turned on him. You can't just swoop in and throw money at everything. This is my life, my responsibility. Our son, Adrian said firmly. Our responsibility. Elena, I understand you've been doing this alone for 8 years. I understand you've built a life that works for you. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you struggle financially when I can help. Help is one thing. Taking over is another. I'm not trying to take over. I'm trying to take care of my child. Adrian's jaw was tight, his control slipping slightly. Do you have any idea what it's been like these past 3 days? Watching him in that hospital bed, knowing I could have been there for 8 years of scraped knees and bedtime stories and first days of school, knowing that while you were working 2 jobs pregnant and raising him alone, I was building an empire that meant nothing because I didn't even know he existed? The raw emotion in his voice stopped Elena's anger cold. I can't get those years back, Adrian continued, quieter now. I can't undo the fact that I missed his first word, his first step, the first time he read a book by himself. But I can make sure that from this moment forward, he has everything he needs, that you both do. So yes, I paid the hospital bills, and I'm going to keep doing things like that because that's what fathers do. They provide for their children. Elena's eyes stung with unexpected tears. I don't want him to think money solves everything. Neither do I. But I also don't want him to grow up thinking he has to make himself smaller to fit into a life constrained by financial struggle. Adrian's voice gentled. You've done an incredible job with him, Elena. He's brilliant, kind, curious, everything a parent could hope for. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Let me help. Not because you can't handle it, but because you shouldn't have to. A nurse walked past, giving them a curious glance. Elena waited until they were alone again before speaking. What are you proposing exactly? Come stay at my place while Matteo recovers. It's large enough that you'll each have your own space. There's a library that would make his little science-loving heart sing, and I have a private physician on call who specializes in blood disorders. No hospital visits unless absolutely necessary, no waiting rooms, just proper care and a comfortable environment. Elena shook her head. Adrian, I can't just move into your house. Why not? Because it's... She struggled to articulate the wrongness of it. It's too much, too fast. A week ago, you didn't know Matteo existed. Now you want us to move in? Temporarily, Adrian clarified. Until he's fully recovered and we figure out a more permanent arrangement. I'm not asking you to uproot your entire life. I'm asking you to let me provide a safe place for our son to heal. And after he heals? What then? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then we figure out what co-parenting looks like for us. I don't have all the answers, Elena, but I know I want to be part of his life. A real part, not just someone who sends birthday cards and shows up for major holidays. He'll have questions about why you weren't there before, about what we were to each other. Then we answer them honestly, in age-appropriate ways. Adrian leaned against the wall, exhaustion showing through his carefully maintained composure. I'm not going to lie to him, and I'm not going to pretend the situation isn't complicated. But kids are resilient. They adapt better than adults do, usually. Elena thought about Matteo's easy acceptance of Adrian as his father, the way he'd simply absorbed the information and moved forward. Maybe Adrian was right. Maybe she was the one making this harder than it needed to be. Your place has a library? She asked. Adrian's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. 3,000 square feet of it. First editions, reference books, complete science encyclopedia sets. I think there's even a telescope on the roof terrace. You're bribing me with books and telescopes. Is it working? Elena wanted to say no, wanted to maintain her independence, prove she didn't need rescuing. But the thought of Matteo in a real bedroom, with access to resources that fed his hungry mind, with a father who clearly wanted to know him, it was hard to refuse on principle alone. 2 weeks, she said finally. We'll stay for 2 weeks while he recovers. After that, we reassess. Fair enough. Adrian pushed off the wall. I'll have rooms prepared. When Dr. Webb clears him for discharge, we pack light, Elena interrupted. I'm not moving in permanently, Adrian. This is temporary. For Matteo's recovery, that's all. Understood. But something in his expression suggested he heard the uncertainty beneath her words, the way she was already second-guessing the decision even as she made it. They returned to Matteo's room to find him awake again, watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration with rapt attention. Did you know that anglerfish use bioluminescence to attract prey in the dark? He asked excitedly when he noticed them. The female has a light organ called an esca that contains bioluminescent bacteria. It's actually a symbiotic relationship. The bacteria get a safe place to live, and the fish gets a hunting tool. I did not know that, Adrian said, settling back into his chair. Tell me more. As Matteo launched into an enthusiastic explanation of deep-sea ecosystems, Elena watched father and son together. Adrian listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed genuine interest, treating Matteo's knowledge with respect rather than condescension. This was what she'd denied them both, she realized. Not just the practical support or financial security, but this, the simple act of a father and son discovering each other through shared curiosity. The guilt sat heavy in her chest. Later that night, after Matteo had finally exhausted himself talking about marine biology and fallen back asleep, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Morrison. How's our boy? The store misses you both. Elena stepped into the hallway to call. Mrs. Morrison answered on the second ring, her warm voice immediately soothing. Elena, sweetheart, tell me everything. So Elena did. She explained Matteo's condition, the treatment that worked, the unexpected arrival of Adrian, and the complicated reality of co-parenting a child with a man she'd hidden from for 8 years. Mrs. Morrison listened without interrupting, the way she always did, until Elena ran out of words. You did the right thing, the older woman said finally, calling him, letting him help. That took more courage than running ever did. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels like I'm losing control of everything I built. Maybe control isn't what you need anymore. Maybe what you need is partnership. I don't know how to do that, Elena admitted. I've been alone so long. Then you learn, for Matteo's sake, if not your own. Mrs. Morrison's voice gentled. That boy deserves to know his father, Elena. And from what you've told me, his father deserves to know him. Don't let pride or fear rob them of that. What if it puts him in danger? What if the threats that made me run are still out there? What if they're not? What if you've been hiding from shadows while the real monsters moved on? Mrs. Morrison paused. Besides, seems to me a powerful man with resources is better protection than a woman alone trying to be invisible. The truth of it stung, but Elena couldn't argue. The apartment, she said, changing subjects. We'll be staying somewhere else for a few weeks while Matteo recovers. I'll still pay rent. Don't be ridiculous. You take care of that boy and don't worry about the apartment. It'll be here when you're ready. Mrs. Morrison's voice carried a smile. And Elena? Maybe give this man a chance. Not for romance or reconciliation, but for Matteo. Let him be the father he seems to want to be. After they said goodbye, Elena stood in the quiet hospital corridor and wondered if she was making the right choice. Everything was moving so fast, crisis to treatment to recovery to cohabitation, all in less than a week. It felt reckless, dangerous even. But Mrs. Morrison was right. Matteo deserved this chance. They all did. The next morning brought Marcus, Adrian's head of security, carrying files that looked ominous even from across the room. Adrian met him in the hospital cafeteria, leaving Elena with Matteo. Tell me you found something, Adrian said, accepting the coffee Marcus offered. 3 possibles from 8 years ago, Marcus replied, spreading photographs across the table. Vincent Calabrese, enforcer for the Russo family, disappeared 7 years ago, presumed dead in a territorial dispute. Unlikely to be our guy. Next. David Chen, independent contractor who did dirty work for whoever paid, currently in federal prison serving 25 to life for racketeering. Possible, but he's been locked up for 6 years. And the third? Marcus slid forward a photograph of a well-dressed man in his 50s. James Whitmore, your former business partner, the one you forced out during the Singapore deal. Adrian's expression hardened. Whitmore had motive. More than motive. He had access to your schedule, knowledge of your personal life, and a vindictive streak a mile wide. After you squeezed him out of the Tanaka merger, he lost everything. Reputation, contacts, fortune. Went bankrupt within 2 years. Where is he now? That's the interesting part. Marcus pulled up something on his tablet. He rebuilt, quietly, carefully, staying off your radar. Runs a legitimate investment firm in Seattle. Married, 2 kids, respectable life. But I did some digging into his finances from 8 years ago. He paid a private investigator $50,000 3 months before Elena disappeared. The PI specialized in surveillance and intimidation. Adrian's jaw tightened. Is the PI still around? Dead, car accident 5 years ago. Convenient timing. Too convenient. Adrian studied the photograph of Whitmore. Older now, softer around the edges, but still recognizable. What are the chances he's a threat now? Hard to say. He's kept his distance from anything connected to you, but if he finds out about Matteo, Marcus left the implication hanging. He won't. Adrian's tone carried absolute finality. Because Whitmore is going to have a very clear understanding that touching my family in any way means he loses everything he's rebuilt. I want surveillance on him, 24/7. If he sneezes, I want to know about it. Already arranged. Marcus gathered the files. But Adrian, there's something else you should consider. If Whitmore sent that threat 8 years ago and Elena ran, he might think he succeeded. Coming out publicly with a son could provoke a reaction. Let it, Adrian said coldly. I'm done hiding what matters. If Whitmore or anyone else wants to make a move, they'll learn very quickly that I'm not the same man I was 8 years ago. Marcus nodded, recognizing the dangerous edge in Adrian's voice. What about Elena and Matteo? Security protocols? They move into the penthouse when Matteo's discharged. I want full security. Cameras, guards, the works. But discreet. The boy doesn't need to feel like he's living in a fortress. Understood. I'll coordinate with building security. Marcus paused. For what it's worth, the kid seems great. Elena did good. She did better than good. She kept him safe when I couldn't. Adrian stood, coffee forgotten. Make sure Whitmore understands that safety is now my responsibility, whatever it takes. When Adrian returned to Matteo's room, he found Elena helping their son work through a math workbook the hospital teacher had provided. Matteo was solving problems 2 grade levels above his age, explaining his reasoning with the kind of logical precision that made Adrian wonder if the boy had inherited more than just his eyes. If train A leaves the station at 60 miles per hour and train B leaves 30 minutes later at 75 miles per hour, when does train B catch up? Matteo read aloud. What do you think? Elena asked. It's a rate problem. I need to calculate the distance train A travels in 30 minutes, then figure out how long it takes train B to make up that distance given the speed differential. Matteo was already writing equations. Train A goes 30 miles in 30 minutes. The speed difference is 15 miles per hour, so train B gains 15 miles every hour. 30 divided by 15 is 2. So 2 hours after train B starts, which is 2.5 hours total from when train A left. Adrian watched Elena's face light up with pride. Perfect. You want to try the next one? Can we do the word problems about probability instead? Those are more interesting. Math is math, baby. You have to do all of it. But probability has real-world applications. When am I going to need to know about trains leaving stations? Elena laughed. When you're planning cross-country travel? I'll just look up train schedules on the internet like a normal person. Adrian couldn't help interjecting. Your mama's right, though. The math itself is useful even if the scenario is arbitrary. You're learning to break down complex problems into solvable steps. That's a skill you'll use for the rest of your life. Matteo considered this. Okay, that's fair. Can I still do probability next? Deal. As Matteo returned to his workbook, Elena glanced at Adrian. He saw the question in her eyes. Everything okay? And gave a slight nod. Not the time or place to discuss Whitmore and potential threats. That conversation would come later when small ears weren't listening. Dr. Webb arrived mid-afternoon with final test results and discharge papers. His factor levels are stable, the bleeding has completely stopped, and his overall blood chemistry looks excellent. I'm comfortable releasing him tomorrow morning with strict instructions for home care. What kind of restrictions? Elena asked. No contact sports or activities with high injury risk for at least 6 weeks. Regular monitoring. We'll want blood work weekly for the first month, then bi-weekly after that. He'll need to avoid medications that affect clotting like aspirin or ibuprofen. And if he has any bleeding that doesn't stop within 10 minutes of direct pressure, you bring him straight to the emergency room. Dr. Webb handed Elena a thick packet of instructions and prescriptions. I've also included a referral to a pediatric hematologist who specializes in clotting disorders. She's excellent, and she'll manage his long-term care. Thank you, Elena said, emotion thick in her voice. For everything. You saved his life. Mr. Moretti's donation saved his life, Dr. Webb corrected gently. I just facilitated the process. He turned to Adrian. Your son is lucky to have you. After the doctor left, reality settled over the room. Tomorrow they would leave the hospital's controlled environment and enter the unknown territory of family life cobbled together from secrets and second chances. We should probably talk about logistics, Elena said quietly while Matteo was absorbed in his probability problems. What time tomorrow? What should I pack? How? I'll have a car here at 10, Adrian interrupted gently. Pack whatever you and Matteo need for a few weeks. Clothes, his books, anything that makes him comfortable. Everything else we can get? I don't want him thinking he has to change who he is to fit into your world. Our world, Adrian corrected. And I don't want that either. I want to know who he already is. The rest we figure out together. Elena nodded, but anxiety was written clearly across her face. Adrian understood it. She was walking into his territory, his resources, his control. 8 years ago, she'd fled that world to protect their child. Now she was voluntarily entering it with no guarantee of what happened next. Elena, he said, low enough that Matteo wouldn't hear. I need you to trust me. I know I haven't earned it yet, and I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I'm asking you to try, for Matteo's sake. I'm here, aren't I? She met his eyes. I called you. I brought you into his life. That's trust, Adrian. Maybe not the blind kind, but it's all I have right now. Then it's enough. That evening, after hospital dinner trays were cleared and visiting hours wound down, Matteo asked the question Elena had been dreading. Papa, why weren't you around before? Adrian had been reading the Mars exploration book aloud. Something about his voice made the technical passages come alive, and he paused mid-sentence. Elena froze in her chair across the room. Adrian closed the book carefully, marked the page, and gave Matteo his full attention. That's a fair question, and you deserve an honest answer. He glanced at Elena, who nodded slightly. Your mama and I knew each other before you were born. We cared about each other very much, but sometimes adults make things complicated. When your mama found out she was pregnant with you, she was in a situation where she didn't feel safe. So she made a very brave choice to protect you by leaving and building a new life where you'd be safe. Safe from what? Matteo asked. From people who might have wanted to hurt her because they knew she was important to me, Adrian said carefully. My work back then, the business I was in, it wasn't always safe. Your mama did what she thought was best to keep you protected. Matteo processed this with the serious expression he wore when thinking through complex problems. So you didn't know about me? No, I didn't know. If I had, Adrian's voice caught slightly. If I had known, things would have been very different. But I know now, and I'm here. Are you going to leave again? The question hit with the force of something sharper than it sounded. Elena's breath caught. No, Adrian said firmly. I'm not leaving, Matteo. I promise you that. I'm going to be part of your life for as long as you'll let me. What if you get busy? What if your work is more important? Nothing is more important than you. Adrian leaned forward, his expression intense. I know you don't know me well enough yet to believe that completely, but I'm going to prove it to you, starting with making sure you recover properly, and then by being there for all the regular stuff, school, birthdays, science documentaries, whatever you want to share with me. Matteo looked at Elena. Is that okay with you, Mama? Elena's throat tightened. Yes, baby. That's okay with me. Good. Matteo settled back against his pillows. Because I like having a papa. And you seem pretty nice so far. Pretty nice, Adrian repeated, something like amusement flickering across his face. I'll take it. Can we finish the chapter now? I want to know if they find water ice in the shadow craters. As Adrian resumed reading, Elena watched them together, dark head and dark head bent over the book, similar profiles catching the light. The careful way Adrian adjusted his reading speed to make sure Matteo followed the technical concepts. This was what she'd denied them both. This simple, profound thing of father and son discovering shared interests. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian's number, sent while he was still reading. Thank you for trusting me with him. She looked up to find him watching her over the top of the book, Matteo absorbed in the story and oblivious to the adult exchange happening around him. Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard, searching for the right words. Finally, she typed, "Thank you for being the father he deserves." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, acknowledgement maybe, or promise. Then he returned his attention to Matteo and the mysteries of Mars, and Elena sat in the uncomfortable space between the past she'd built and the future racing toward them faster than she'd ever imagined possible. Tomorrow, they would leave the hospital. Tomorrow, their real life as a family, fractured, complicated, held together by love and necessity in equal measure, would begin. Elena just hoped she was ready for it. The black SUV pulled up to Adrian's building at precisely 10:30 the next morning, sleek and expensive in a way that made Elena acutely aware of the worn duffel bag containing everything she and Matteo owned that mattered. The doorman, an older gentleman with kind eyes, greeted them with genuine warmth that suggested Adrian had already briefed the staff. "Welcome home, Mr. Moretti, and you must be Ms. Varelli and young Matteo." He held the door with practiced grace. "I'm Robert. Anything you need day or night, you just let me know." Matteo, still wearing his hospital bracelet because he'd insisted on keeping it as a souvenir, stared up at the marble lobby with wide eyes. "Papa, do you live in a palace?" Adrian's lips quirked. "Just a building. Come on, I'll show you." The elevator was the kind with mirrors and polished brass, rising so smoothly Elena barely felt the movement. Matteo pressed his face against the glass, watching the city drop away beneath them as they climbed to the penthouse level. When the doors opened directly into Adrian's apartment, Elena's carefully maintained composure faltered. The space was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, hardwood floors that gleamed under recessed lighting, Furniture that managed to be both expensive and comfortable. Modern art hung on walls painted in neutral tones that somehow felt warm rather than sterile. But what dominated the room was books, shelves of them, integrated into the walls surrounding a fireplace that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. "The library's through there," Adrian said, nodding toward double doors. 3 rooms, actually: reference, fiction, and scientific texts. "Matteo, I thought you might like the science room. It has the telescope access." Matteo had already wandered toward the windows, staring out at the view. "I can see the whole city from here." "Pretty much." Adrian set down the hospital bag he'd insisted on carrying. "Your room is down this hall. Want to see?" Elena followed as Adrian led Matteo through the penthouse. Each room they passed seemed larger than her entire apartment. A formal dining room that seated 12, a kitchen with professional-grade appliances, a media room with a screen that took up an entire wall, and then Matteo's room. Adrian pushed open the door to reveal a space clearly prepared with care. The bed was positioned near windows with a view of the lake. Bookshelves lined one wall already stocked with science texts and novels, and a desk held a computer setup that made Matteo gasp audibly. "Is that a quantum processor?" he breathed, moving toward the equipment like it might disappear if he blinked. "Entry-level model, but yes," Adrian confirmed. "I thought you might like to explore programming, if you're interested." "If I'm interested?" Matteo turned to his mother with pleading eyes. "Mama, can I—" "After you rest," Elena said automatically, then caught herself. This wasn't their cramped apartment where rest meant lying on a shared bed reading. This was different. Everything was different. "Maybe for a little bit," she amended, "if your papa shows you how to use it safely." "I can do that," Adrian said. He gestured to another door. "You have your own bathroom through there, and Elena, your room is next door, connected by this interior door if you want privacy or accessibility, whichever you prefer." Elena's room was equally thoughtful. Comfortable bed, reading chair by the window, an ensuite bathroom with a tub deep enough to actually soak in. Someone had stocked it with toiletries, fluffy towels, a robe that looked sinfully soft. On the nightstand sat a carafe of water and a French press coffee maker with beans in a sealed container. "You remembered," she said quietly, touching the coffee setup. Adrian stood in the doorway, careful not to intrude on her space. "Black, 2 sugars. Some things are worth remembering." The intimacy of the gesture, the fact that he'd thought about her morning coffee after 8 years, made Elena's chest tight. "This is too much," she said, not for the first time. "It's a guest room," Adrian replied. "I have 4 of them. This one just happens to be next to Matteo's because I thought you'd want to be close while he recovers." From the next room, they heard Matteo's delighted exclamation about finding a telescope mount on his balcony. "He has a balcony?" Elena asked weakly. "Small one. Barely big enough for the telescope and a chair. But the light pollution is manageable from this height, and the view of the stars is decent." Adrian's expression was carefully neutral. "I can have it locked if you're worried about safety." "No, Elena sank onto the edge of the bed. "Adrian, this is a lot to process. The penthouse, the telescope, the quantum computer. He's 8 years old and he's been living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a bookstore. This is like going from black and white to Technicolor." Adrian moved into the room slowly, reading her body language, and sat in the reading chair at a respectful distance. "Would you rather I'd put him in an empty room with nothing personal, made him feel like a guest instead of family?" "That's not what I mean." "Then what do you mean?" Elena struggled to articulate the fear sitting heavy in her stomach. "I mean, what happens when this ends? When he goes back to regular life and regular things? How do I compete with telescopes and quantum computers and views of the entire city?" "You don't have to compete," Adrian said quietly. "Elena, you're his mother. You're the person who's been there for every fever, every nightmare, every small victory and setback for 8 years. Nothing I give him changes that. These are just things. You gave him everything that matters. Things he's going to get used to, things that will make our real life feel small and inadequate, or things that supplement the foundation you built." Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not trying to replace what you've given him. I'm trying to add to it. There's a difference." Before Elena could respond, Matteo appeared in the doorway, bouncing with barely contained energy despite doctors' orders to rest. "Mama, There's a whole room just for science books, and the telescope has a motorized mount, and Papa says maybe we can look at Jupiter's moons tonight if it's clear. His enthusiasm was infectious, pure childhood joy unmarred by adult complications. Elena forced her anxiety down and smiled. That sounds amazing, baby. But remember what Dr. Webb said, you need to take it easy for a few days. I know, no running, no roughhousing, no excessive activity. Matteo recited the instructions dutifully. But I can read, right? And use the computer for educational purposes? Educational purposes, Elena repeated, catching Adrian's amused expression. Yes, that should be fine. Can Papa show me the programming interface? Just for an hour? Then I'll rest, I promise. Elena looked at Adrian, who nodded. 1 hour, then lunch and quiet time. Deal! Matteo grabbed Adrian's hand with the unselfconscious trust of childhood. Come on, I want to see if it can run simulation models. After they left, Elena sat in the quiet of her temporary bedroom and tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken. 1 week ago, she'd been folding laundry in her apartment, her biggest concern whether she could pick up an extra shift at the bookstore. Now she was living in a penthouse with the man she'd loved and left, watching him bond with the son he'd just discovered, surrounded by luxury she'd forgotten existed. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Morrison checking in. How's the new place? Elena took a photo of the view from her window and sent it. The response came immediately. Holy hell, girl, that's quite the upgrade. Temporary, Elena typed back. Just until Matteo recovers. Sure, temporary. That's why, Adrian, I run an empire. Moretti set up a science library and telescope for an 8-year-old he's known for 4 days. Elena stared at the message. Mrs. Morrison had a point. None of this felt temporary in execution. It felt like Adrian was building something permanent, creating a space where Matteo belonged, where they both belonged. The question was whether Elena was ready to belong here again. She found them in Matteo's room an hour later, both bent over the computer screen as Adrian explained object-oriented programming concepts in terms an 8-year-old could grasp. Matteo was asking questions that showed he was actually following the logic, his quick mind already making connections. So if I create a class for planets, I can give them all properties like mass and orbital period, but each instance would have different values, Matteo asked. Exactly. You're creating a template. Each planet is an object based on that template, but with unique data. That's so cool. Can we make a solar system simulator? Adrian glanced at Elena in the doorway. Maybe after lunch and rest time. Your mama's giving me a look that says we've exceeded our hour. I wasn't... Elena started, then laughed. Okay, yes. Lunch, then Matteo needs to actually rest. Doctor's orders. I'm not tired, Matteo protested automatically, then yawned so widely it undermined his argument. Lunch, Adrian said firmly, saving the program they'd been working on. Then rest. The computer will still be here later. Over lunch, prepared by a private chef whose existence Adrian mentioned so casually that Elena nearly choked on her water, Matteo peppered them both with questions about their past relationship. How did they meet? What did they do together? Why did Mama leave? Elena and Adrian navigated the conversation carefully, offering truth in age-appropriate doses. They'd met through mutual friends, enjoyed similar interests, cared deeply for each other. But circumstances had made staying together complicated, and Elena had made the difficult choice to leave to keep Matteo safe. But you're not mad at each other, Matteo asked, looking between them. No, Adrian said. We're not mad. And you both want to be my parents? Yes, Elena confirmed. Always. Both of us. Okay. Matteo accepted this with the pragmatism of childhood. That's good. Some kids at school have parents who fight all the time. It seems hard. After lunch, Elena insisted Matteo actually lie down for quiet time. She read to him from the Mars exploration book, her voice soothing, until his eyes grew heavy. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep, exhausted from the emotional and physical toll of the past week. She found Adrian in the main living area, working on his laptop but closing it immediately when she entered. He's sleeping, Elena reported, finally admitted he was tired. He's resilient, like his mother. Elena moved to the windows, looking out at the city spread beneath them. From this height, Chicago looked manageable, organized, beautiful. Nothing like the chaotic tangle it felt like from street level. Can we talk about what happens next? She asked without turning around. Real talk, not the polite temporary arrangement version. Okay. Adrian's voice came from closer than she expected. She glanced back to find him standing a respectful few feet away. Real talk. What do you want to know? What your end game is? This setup. She gestured at the penthouse. This isn't temporary. You don't prepare a room like Matteo's for a 2-week stay. So what are you actually hoping happens here? Adrian was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. I'm hoping we find a way to be a family. Not the traditional kind, maybe, but something that works for all three of us. Where Matteo has both his parents actively involved in his life. Where you don't have to work yourself to exhaustion to provide for him. Where I don't miss any more of his childhood than I already have. That's not an answer. That's a wish list. You want specifics? Fine. Adrian's businessman facade slipped into place, the negotiator who'd built an empire. Specifically, I want Matteo enrolled in a school that challenges him intellectually. I want him to have access to the resources his intelligence deserves, tutors, programs, opportunities. I want you to not have to choose between spending time with him and making rent. I want us to figure out custody arrangements that prioritize his well-being over our history. And yes, I want you both to stay. Not temporarily, permanently. The honesty of it hit Elena like a physical force. Adrian, I'm not asking you to marry me or pretend the last 8 years didn't happen, he continued. I'm not even asking you to forgive me for whatever you think I failed at back then. I'm asking you to consider that maybe hiding isn't protecting anymore. That maybe the best thing for Matteo is to have both parents, openly, providing for him together. You're asking me to give up my independence. I'm asking you to accept support. There's a difference. Elena turned to face him fully. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, support looks a lot like control. You pay the hospital bills, you provide the housing, you set up the perfect room with the perfect equipment. What's mine in this equation? What do I contribute that isn't already covered by your money? Everything that matters, Adrian said intensely. You know him, Elena. You know his fears and his dreams and what makes him laugh. You know how to comfort him when he's scared and challenge him when he's bored. You've built the person he is. I'm just trying to add resources to the foundation you created. Resources that come with strings. What strings? Adrian's frustration was showing now. Tell me what strings you think I'm attaching, because from my perspective, I'm trying to take care of my son and the woman who kept him alive when I couldn't. The string where I owe you, where every decision goes through you, because you're paying for everything. Where I stop being his mother and become just another person in your orbit, grateful for whatever access you allow. That's not... Adrian stopped, visibly controlling his temper. That's not what this is. And if that's what you're afraid of, we can formalize arrangements, legal documents, custody agreements, whatever makes you feel secure that you're not losing autonomy. I don't want legal documents. I want... Elena's voice broke. I want to know that I'm enough, that what I gave him for 8 years matters, even though it wasn't telescopes and quantum computers. That I'm not just the person who hid him away while you would have given him the world. The vulnerability in her voice seemed to crack something in Adrian's control. He closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching. Elena, listen to me. You are enough. You've always been enough. What you did, raising him alone, keeping him safe, building a life from nothing, that's extraordinary. I'm not trying to replace that or diminish it. I'm just trying to make sure you don't have to do it alone anymore. I don't know how to not do it alone, Elena whispered. It's been just us for so long. Then let me teach you. Let me show you what partnership looks like. Adrian's hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. Not because you need rescuing, but because you deserve support. Because Matteo deserves to have both parents working together instead of one parent carrying everything. Elena looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his expression, the careful way he was trying to navigate her fears without dismissing them. This close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 8 years ago, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. Time had marked them both. 2 months, she said finally. We try this for 2 months. Co-parenting, living here, figuring out what family looks like for us. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if this doesn't work, if we can't figure out how to do this without someone getting hurt, you won't use your resources to take him from me. That we'll find a solution that prioritizes Matteo, even if it means I go back to the bookstore and you have him on weekends or whatever arrangement makes sense. Adrian's jaw tightened. I would never take him from you. Promise me anyway, because right now you have all the power in this situation. The money, the lawyers, the connections. I need to know that you won't weaponize that if things go wrong. I promise, Adrian said, and the weight of the vow was evident in his voice. Elena, I swear to you, on everything I've built, on my life, I will never use my resources against you. Whatever happens between us, Matteo comes first, and he needs his mother. I would never try to change that. Some of the tension in Elena's shoulders eased. Okay, then 2 months. We try. 2 months, Adrian agreed. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. And Elena, thank you for trusting me this far. I know it's not easy. It's terrifying, she admitted. But Mrs. Morrison keeps telling me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Smart woman. The smartest. Elena managed a small smile. I should check on Matteo. She left Adrian in the living room and returned to Matteo's room, where their son slept peacefully in a bed that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. She sat in the chair beside the bed and watched him breathe, looking for signs of distress and finding only contentment. This was what she'd always wanted for him: safety, comfort, opportunity. She'd just never imagined it would come packaged with the father she'd hidden him from and the life she'd run away from. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Saw the Moretti boy had a health scare. Glad he's recovered. Would be a shame if anything else happened. Elena's blood went cold. She stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure she understood the implication. Then she was moving, phone clutched in her hand, finding Adrian still in the living room. Someone knows, she said without preamble, holding out the phone. Adrian read the message, his expression turning to stone. When did you get this? Just now. Adrian, if someone knows about Matteo, he was already dialing. Marcus, we have a situation. He read the message verbatim, then rattled off Elena's phone number. I want that traced immediately. Pull security footage from the building, flag any unfamiliar faces in the area, and activate full protective protocols. Now. After hanging up, Adrian's attention turned to Elena. You're safe here. The building has top-tier security, and I'm adding additional measures. Nobody gets near either of you without going through my team. This is what I was afraid of, Elena said, her voice shaking. This is why I ran. Someone knows about him, Adrian. Someone is threatening him. And they just made the last mistake of their life, Adrian said coldly. Because now I know they exist, and I know they're stupid enough to come after my son. Marcus will find them, and when he does, no. Elena grabbed his arm. No illegal retribution, no making problems disappear the old way. I need you to promise me that whatever you do, it's legal. I won't let Matteo grow up watching his father go to prison for protecting him. Elena, promise me, Adrian. Legal channels, proper authorities. I need you to be the man you claim to be now, not the one you were 8 years ago. Adrian's jaw worked, clearly wrestling with the desire to handle this the fast, efficient way versus the promise she was demanding. Finally, he nodded. Legal channels. But I'm not sitting back and waiting for them to make a move. We're finding out who sent that message and making sure they understand that threatening Matteo brings consequences they can't afford. Elena sagged with relief. Thank you. Go sit with him. I'll handle this. She returned to Matteo's room, pulling the chair closer to his bed, and kept watch while Adrian's voice drifted from the living room, controlled, authoritative, issuing orders that would mobilize resources Elena could only imagine. This was the power she'd been afraid of 8 years ago, the reach and influence that made Adrian's world dangerous. But now that power was protecting their son instead of threatening him. Maybe that made all the difference. Matteo stirred, his eyes opening slowly. Mama, you okay? You look worried. Elena smoothed his hair back, forcing her face into calmness. I'm fine, baby. Just thinking. About what? About how lucky I am to have you. She kissed his forehead. Go back to sleep. I'm right here. Is Papa still here too? Yes. He's in the living room working. He's not going anywhere. Good, Matteo yawned. I like it when we're all together. After he drifted back to sleep, Elena sat in the expensive chair in the expensive room and acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. This wasn't temporary. It couldn't be. Whatever she and Adrian were building, family, partnership, something in between, it was permanent the moment she'd made that phone call at the hospital. There was no going back to the quiet life above the bookstore. Not when someone out there knew about Matteo and saw him as leverage. Not when staying invisible meant staying alone. And not when the alternative, however terrifying, meant giving their son everything he deserved, including both parents willing to fight for him. Elena pulled out her phone and texted Mrs. Morrison. I think we're staying. For real. Is that crazy? The response came quickly. Only if you think love and security are crazy. Take the leap, Elena. Some risks are worth it. Through the doorway, she could hear Adrian's voice, steel wrapped in silk, handling threats with the efficiency of someone who'd built an empire on being 3 steps ahead. He was protecting them. Not just with money or resources, but with everything he had. Maybe that was enough to trust. Maybe that was everything. Marcus traced the threatening message to a burner phone purchased in Seattle 3 days earlier. The connection to James Whitmore wasn't coincidental. The phone had pinged off a cell tower 2 blocks from his investment firm before going dark. Within 48 hours, Adrian had enough evidence to bury the man who'd threatened his family 8 years ago and was foolish enough to try again. But Elena had asked for legal channels, so Adrian delivered the evidence to the FBI instead of handling it the way his younger self would have. Federal agents arrested Whitmore on charges of extortion, intimidation, and conspiracy. The private investigator he'd hired back then had kept meticulous records. Insurance, he'd called it. And those records included photographs of Elena, documentation of the threats, payment receipts. Everything needed to prove Whitmore had orchestrated the campaign that sent Elena running. Adrian watched the arrest happen via security footage Marcus provided, seeing Whitmore led from his respectable office in handcuffs while his colleagues stared in shock. There was satisfaction in it, but not the visceral kind Adrian had expected. What mattered more was the phone call that came afterward. It's done, Adrian told Elena, finding her in the library where she'd been reading to Matteo. Whitmore's been arrested. Federal charges. He won't be bothering us again. Elena's relief was palpable. You're sure? The FBI has him on multiple counts. He's looking at serious prison time. Adrian glanced at Matteo, who was absorbed in a book about black holes. He can't hurt us anymore. That night, after Matteo was asleep, Elena found Adrian on the terrace overlooking the city. The Chicago skyline glittered against the dark lake, beautiful and impersonal. Thank you, she said, wrapping her jacket tighter against the October wind, for doing it the right way, for keeping your promise. I told you I would. Adrian didn't look away from the view. Did you doubt me? Honestly? A little. Elena moved to stand beside him at the railing. The Adrian I knew 8 years ago would have handled this differently, quieter, more permanent. The Adrian from 8 years ago didn't have a son who needed a father around. He finally turned to face her. I meant what I said, Elena. I'm not that person anymore. I can't afford to be. Because of Matteo? Because of both of you. The admission hung in the cold air between them. Elena studied his profile, seeing the control that had always defined him warring with something softer underneath. What happens now? She asked. Whitmore's gone. The immediate threat is handled. We've been here 2 weeks. Are you expecting us to leave? Do you want to? Elena considered the question honestly. 2 weeks of living in the penthouse had shown her what life could be. Matteo thriving with access to resources that fed his brilliant mind, herself falling back into rhythms with Adrian that felt both familiar and entirely new. They weren't the same people who'd loved each other 8 years ago. They were something different now. Something built on shared purpose rather than just attraction. No, she admitted, I don't want to leave, but I need to know what staying means. Not just for Matteo, but for us. What do you want it to mean? I don't know. Elena's laugh was frustrated. I don't know how to do this, Adrian. How to be a family with someone I loved and lost and found again under completely different circumstances. How to raise a child together when we're not together. How to... Who says we're not together? The question stopped her completely. She stared at him, searching his expression for clarification. Adrian's control slipped enough to show vulnerability beneath. I never stopped caring about you, Elena. Even when I thought you'd left because you wanted to. Even when I convinced myself it was better this way. Seeing you again, seeing what you built, who you are now, it just confirmed what I'd been trying to ignore for 8 years. Which is? That I still love you. That I probably never stopped. He held up a hand before she could respond. I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm not expecting you to forget the reasons you left or pretend the past didn't happen. I'm just telling you the truth. Because if we're going to build something here, for Matteo, for us, it should be built on honesty. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Adrian, you don't have to answer now, he continued. Take whatever time you need. Figure out what you want. I'll be here either way. For Matteo, definitely. But for you too, if you'll let me. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the lake and the distant sounds of the city below. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, processing the confession she'd never expected to hear. I need time, she said finally, to figure out what I feel, what I want, what's best for all of us. Take it. I'm not going anywhere. They stood in silence for a while longer, two people navigating the complicated space between past and future, until the cold drove them back inside. Over the next month, something shifted. Elena enrolled Matteo in a private school that specialized in gifted education, watching him flourish with peers who matched his intellectual intensity. She started working part-time at a nonprofit literacy foundation, something Adrian suggested when he learned about her passion for connecting people with books. It paid better than the bookstore and offered the kind of fulfillment that made work feel meaningful rather than just necessary. And slowly, carefully, she and Adrian built something that looked increasingly like a real relationship. Family dinners where they discussed Matteo's day and their own. Movie nights where Matteo fell asleep between them on the couch. Quiet conversations after their son was in bed, talking about everything from current events to memories they'd avoided for years. One evening, 6 weeks after moving into the penthouse, Elena found Adrian in his office reviewing contracts. She knocked on the open door, and he looked up with the automatic smile that had become his default when he saw her. Matteo's asleep, she reported. Finally, he wanted to finish the chapter about gravitational waves. That kid's going to be a physicist, Adrian said, closing his laptop. Or possibly rule the world. Could go either way. Elena laughed, moving into the office. Can I ask you something? Always. Why didn't you move on? In 8 years, you're successful, attractive, available. Why stay single? Adrian leaned back in his chair, considering the question. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. I told myself it was because I was focused on business, but the truth is, nobody measured up to what I'd lost. Even thinking you'd left by choice, even believing you wanted nothing to do with me, I couldn't make myself feel for anyone else what I felt for you. That's a long time to carry a torch for someone who left. It wasn't carrying a torch. It was just the truth. He stood, moving around the desk to lean against it. What about you? 8 years is a long time to be alone. I had Matteo. That was enough. Elena looked down at her hands. I told myself I didn't have time for relationships, didn't want to complicate things or bring strangers into his life. But really, I think I was just afraid of trusting someone, of letting anyone close enough to hurt us. And now, Elena met his eyes. Now I'm terrified for different reasons. Like what? Like what happens if I let myself love you again and it doesn't work? Like what happens to Matteo if we try this and fail? Like whether I'm making decisions based on what's best for everyone or just because being with you feels like coming home after a very long trip away. Adrian closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She didn't. Elena, I can't promise we won't make mistakes. I can't guarantee everything will be perfect or easy, but I can promise I'll try, every day, to be the partner you need and the father Matteo deserves, to choose you both over everything else, to build something real instead of just coexisting in the same space. That's a big promise. I know, but I'm good at keeping promises when they matter. His hand lifted to cup her face gently. You matter. This matters. Tell me you feel it too. Elena's breath caught. I do. I'm just scared. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't. Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone. Scared means you care. Means it's real. Very real, Elena whispered. Adrian, He kissed her before she could finish, and it was like falling backward through 8 years to the first time and simultaneously nothing like it at all. This kiss carried the weight of shared parenthood, mutual loss, hard-won trust. This kiss was built on foundation instead of just attraction. When they broke apart, Elena's hands were fisted in his shirt and her heart was racing. Wow, she managed. Yeah. Adrian's smile was genuine, unguarded. So where does this leave us? I think, Elena took a breath, steadying herself. I think it leaves us trying, really trying, not just co-parenting, not just living in the same space, actually building a relationship, seeing if we can be the family Matteo deserves. I can work with that. But we do it right, Elena added firmly. Therapy if we need it, clear communication, putting Matteo first even when it's hard. No secrets, no running away when things get complicated. Agreed, though I reserve the right to occasionally buy expensive gifts for our son when he does something particularly brilliant. Our son, Elena repeated, tasting the words. I like how that sounds. So do I. Adrian pulled her closer. Elena Varelli, will you let me take you on a proper date? Something that doesn't involve hospital cafeterias or discussing our son's medical care? She laughed. Are you asking me out? I'm asking if the mother of my child, who I've been in love with for 8 years, would like to have dinner with me. Alone, like adults do. I'd like that. Elena rested her head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. But who watches Matteo? I have a very trustworthy security team and a penthouse with excellent surveillance. I think we can manage a few hours. They arranged the date for the following weekend. Adrian took her to a rooftop restaurant with a view of the city, somewhere quiet and elegant where they could talk without interruption. Over wine and expertly prepared food, they discussed everything they'd avoided for weeks. The past they'd shared, the years they'd lost, the future they were trying to build. I need you to understand something, Elena said over dessert. I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago. I'm harder in some ways, more cautious. Motherhood changed me. Survival changed me. I know. I see it. Adrian reached across the table for her hand. And I love who you've become. The strength, the fierce protectiveness, the way you put Matteo first even when it cost you. That's not weakness, Elena. That's everything. What if I can't give you what you need? What if I'm too broken from hiding for so long? You're not broken. You're careful. There's a difference. He squeezed her fingers gently. And I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest, to tell me when you're scared or overwhelmed, to let me help carry things instead of shouldering everything alone. I'm working on it, Elena admitted. It's not easy. The important things rarely are. When they returned to the penthouse, they found Marcus in the living room with Matteo, both absorbed in a chess match. The security specialist had turned out to be surprisingly good with children, treating Matteo's questions with the same seriousness he gave threat assessments. Checkmate, Matteo announced proudly. That's 3 games to 2. You're getting too good at this, Marcus complained good-naturedly. He stood when he noticed Adrian and Elena. Everything went smoothly. Kid's brilliant, by the way. Almost beat me 4 times. After Marcus left, Matteo looked between his parents with knowing eyes. You guys went on a date. We did, Adrian confirmed. Is that okay? Are you boyfriend and girlfriend now? Elena and Adrian exchanged glances. We're working on it, Elena said. How would you feel about that? Matteo considered the question with his usual seriousness. I think it would be good. You both seem happier when you're together, and I like it when we're all a family. We are a family, Adrian said. Whether your mama and I are together or not, that doesn't change. I know, but it's better this way. Matteo yawned. Can I stay up and watch one more documentary? Absolutely not, Elena said, ruffling his hair. It's bedtime. School tomorrow. She tucked Matteo in while Adrian cleaned up from the chess match. By the time she returned to the living room, he'd poured 2 glasses of wine and was standing by the windows overlooking the city. He's adjusting well, Elena observed, accepting the glass he offered. Better than either of us, probably. Adrian's arm came around her waist naturally, pulling her against his side. Kids are resilient. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Elena thought about how much had changed in 2 months, from the terrifying phone call about Matteo's bleeding to standing here in Adrian's penthouse, building a life she'd never imagined possible. "I love you," she said quietly. "I need you to know that. It scares me, and I don't know exactly what it means for us, but it's true. I love you." Adrian's arm tightened around her. "I love you too. More than I thought possible. Where do we go from here?" "Forward," Adrian said simply. "Together, whatever that looks like." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "I want to make this official. Not rushing into marriage or anything dramatic, but actually being together. A real relationship. You, me, and Matteo." "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but yes, I'm sure." She smiled up at him. "Someone very wise once told me that scared means you care, means it's real." Sounds like a smart person. He has his moments. Adrian kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and promising. When they broke apart, Elena's wine glass was empty and her resolve was solid. This was right. Not easy, not simple, but right. They were building something real from the broken pieces of their past, creating a future where all three of them belonged. 3 months later, Elena officially moved her belongings from the apartment above the bookstore to the penthouse. Mrs. Morrison threw a small going-away party, crying happy tears while insisting Elena bring Matteo to visit regularly. "You deserve this," the older woman said, hugging Elena. "Tight, happiness, security, love, all of it." "I'm going to miss you," Elena said, meaning it. "I'm a phone call away. And you better bring that brilliant boy around to tell me about his science projects." The new school year brought changes. Matteo thrived in advanced classes, made friends with kids who appreciated his intellectual intensity, joined the robotics club. He spent weekends with Adrian learning about business strategy, and with Elena exploring museums and libraries. He had his own room, his own space, but most nights he'd wander into the living room where his parents were reading or talking and insert himself between them, content just to be near them both. Elena started teaching night classes at the Literacy Foundation, discovering she had a gift for helping adults learn to read. Adrian supported her completely, rearranging his schedule to be home with Matteo when she worked late. They fell into rhythms that felt like family. Sunday morning pancakes that Adrian burned the first 3 times before perfecting the recipe. Friday movie nights where Matteo chose increasingly complex films and asked thoughtful questions. Bedtime routines where both parents participated, reading chapters and answering Matteo's endless stream of scientific inquiries. And in the quiet moments when Matteo was asleep, Elena and Adrian built their own relationship. They talked about everything: dreams, fears, past mistakes, future possibilities. They went on dates, stayed in for quiet evenings, traveled occasionally when Matteo's school schedule allowed. They learned each other again, discovering how they'd both changed and finding that those changes made them more compatible rather than less. 6 months after Elena and Matteo moved in, Adrian proposed, not with grand gestures or public displays, but privately, in the library where they'd spent so many evenings together. "I want you to know this is permanent for me," he said, producing a ring that was elegant and understated, exactly her style. "I want marriage, partnership, building a life together officially. But I also want you to take whatever time you need. There's no pressure, no timeline. Just know that when you're ready, I'll be here." Elena looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, then at the life they'd built together from crisis and second chances. "Yes," she said. "I don't need time to think about it. Yes." Adrian's surprise was genuine. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Hippie. Elena let him slide the ring onto her finger. "We've done this backward, child first, relationship second, proposal third. But it works for us. This works for us." They told Matteo the next morning over breakfast. He looked at Elena's ring, looked at his parents, and grinned. "Does this mean we're officially a family now?" "We've been officially a family since the day you were born," Adrian said. "This just makes it legal." "Cool. Can I be in the wedding?" "You can be the entire wedding party if you want," Elena laughed. They married quietly, 6 months later in a small ceremony with only close friends and family. Matteo stood between them during the vows, holding both their hands, beaming with pride at being included. Mrs. Morrison cried through the entire ceremony. Marcus looked uncomfortable in a suit but smiled genuinely when toasting the couple. Elena wore a simple dress that made her feel beautiful. Adrian couldn't take his eyes off her, and Matteo declared it the best day ever when they let him give a speech about the statistical probability of his parents finding each other again after 8 years apart. The odds were very low, he concluded seriously. But sometimes the improbable things are the best things. After the ceremony, after the small reception, after Matteo was asleep in his room exhausted from excitement, Elena and Adrian stood on the terrace overlooking the city where their new life had begun. "We did it," Elena said, leaning into her husband's embrace. "We actually made it work." "Did you doubt we would?" "Every single day at first," she admitted. "Less now. But sometimes I still can't believe this is real." "It's real." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "You, me, Matteo, this family we built. All of it real." Elena thought about the phone call that had shattered her carefully constructed silence, the crisis that had forced her to trust the man she'd run from, the slow rebuilding of love from the foundation of shared parenthood. Nothing about their journey had been conventional or easy, but standing here, married to the father of her child, building a life that honored both the past and the future, Elena knew it had all been worth it. The secret she'd kept for 8 years was no longer a weapon or a shield. It was just truth, acknowledged and integrated into a family that was stronger for having survived the separation. "I love you," she said, turning to face Adrian, "for being patient, for fighting for us, for being the father Matteo deserves and the partner I needed. I love you too, for being brave enough to call me when it mattered, for trusting me with our son, for giving us a second chance." They kissed under the Chicago stars, two people who'd lost each other and found their way back through blood and choice and love. Inside, Matteo slept peacefully, safe and loved and whole. The past was acknowledged but no longer painful. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility, and the present, this moment, this family, this hard-won happiness, was everything. Some bonds were written in genetics, immediate and undeniable. Others were built through choice, day by day, decision by decision. The strongest bonds combined both biology and intention, nature and nurture, fate and free will. Adrian and Elena had both. A child who connected them biologically, and a love they'd chosen to rebuild despite every reason to walk away. They'd faced the past, confronted the threats, worked through the fears. And on the other side of it all, they'd found something worth every difficult step. They'd found family. Not the traditional kind that came easily, but the kind forged in crisis and sealed in commitment, the kind built on honesty, trust, and the understanding that some things were worth fighting for. Their son, their love, their future together. That was the real happy ending, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people willing to face struggle together. Not the erasure of the past, but its integration into a stronger present. Not the guarantee of perfection, but the promise to keep trying. Elena looked at Adrian, her husband, her son's father, her partner in building this beautiful, complicated life. "Ready for whatever comes next?" she asked. Adrian smiled, genuine and unguarded. "With you? Always." And that was enough. That was everything. The story that began with a terrifying phone call ended with a family standing together, no longer hiding, no longer running. Just living, loving, growing, together, the way it should have been from the start. The way it would be from this moment forward, forever.